Hello to you, my fellow Dark Ones. How are you guys doing today? How's life? We are going to start today's episode by doing a bit of ore processing, and hopefully it's going to be automated. Ore processing in GregTech looks a bit daunting, but it's actually not. You need to macerate, you need to wash it with water, sometimes you need to wash it with chemicals, you need to centrifuge something, you need to thermally centrifuge something, and sometimes you need to sift. Where it does get confusing is the filtering. You should know which ores to wash with water, which ores you should wash with chemicals, and which ores you should sift. And basically that's it. We're going to do ore processing in this area over here next to our chemical plant. And yes, I have set up the final distillation towers as well as the oil cracker in order to process coal tar. We had already everything, I just reassembled things. Okay, so this is our ore processing plant, and don't you worry, it's actually going to look way better than this, but for the moment we need it to function. The first thing that you might notice is that we have an extra maceration tower, and the reason for that is very simple. Symmetry, that's it. Also, out of all the machines that we have over here, that's the most useful one, I guess. But we have two maceration towers, we're going to have two simple washers, we have a chemical bath, we have a centrifuge, and we have a thermal centrifuge. From our corridor over here, I have reclaimed 21 gas turbines. I added a maceration tower, so that would be like 25 if I want to reclaim them all. The reason that I'm mentioning this is that for this area, I'm going to use superconductors from the high voltage age. For obvious reasons, you don't really need to do that, there's no point, you can just hook up the generators to the hatches. However, not every single machine is going to consume the maximum amount of voltage, and also I should really learn how to have a central power station and then do the cabling. So think of it as a trial for me to learn stuff. I actually used the superconductors on one of the distillation towers because it was consuming 256 EU at high voltage. I wanted to convert it into EV, so it would have been 1024 EU per tick. And well, if you look at gold cables, they have losses. So I just used an AV energy hatch, two gas turbines, and one superconductor. Again, for symmetry purposes, I know it doesn't make any sense, but let me get some superconductors. Okay, so it's been a while later, and well, the superconductor is not super expensive, but it does take time to make. Especially, I'm actually not using the single cable, it's the 4x cable. But it can handle 24 amps, which is crazy. So over here at our ore processing, I have hooked up everything to an applied energy 6 cable. Every single input hatch on the machine is going to receive a storage bus. The reason that we are using a storage bus is that it's essentially an export bus, but with a ton of filtering options. Really hoping that applied energy 6 can understand the difference between a purified redstone ore and, I don't know, a purified iron ore. Every output bus on every single machine, on the other hand, is receiving an import bus. There is a controller over there with a ton of gas turbines. And the gas turbines are hooked up to the superconductor, obviously. Also, I don't really know, this is a superconductor, but it's not covered, so if I touch it, will it kill me or not? I don't really know. During this episode, I'm not gonna touch it. Also, I have, 18 generators. It's probably an overkill, totally not required. But you see, 18 generators are hooked up to one cable. Literally, and it's powering every single machine. Anyways, ideally we will have an input chest somewhere in the system, which is going to receive an import bus. So ores will go inside this chest, it will be distributed between the machines, and at the end of the day we're going to have an ender chest which is going to take the results back into our applied energistic system. And over here I want to use this filter. Or dictionary filter card. I don't really know how it works, but I want dust. So will it take the dust? Yeah, it's dust nickel, dust shadow iron. Well, I will learn how to edit that part. But we can try this. If I disconnect the cables, because we do have storage buses, then it will go inside one of the machines. And I don't know, put a redstone dust inside. What will happen? That's also a dust. I don't know, with a hyphen? Let me check. I was reading the wiki, I think it overcomplicates everything, so I'm using a storage bus, and we're going to try everything with a sulfur dust. So, sulfur dust, I think, well, we have to put it inside the chest, like so. It should go into that macerator. Oh yeah, I have to turn it on. Yes, it will be macerated, then it should go inside this macerator, and then it should go inside the centrifuge, like so, and voila. Oh, okay. Okay, so the cable doesn't kill you. That's a good thing to know. And we should have sulfur dust in here. Lovely. You don't need the wiki. So let me try to set up some filters and process some ores. I'll be right back. Okay, so ore processing is going incredibly smoothly. I'm really happy with this. And I also had to add a few more machines. For example, we have an extra thermal centrifuge. We have 2 electrolyzers and 2 more centrifuges. Because we are getting a ton of junk, we might as well process every single item that we can over here, then transfer the rest to our applied energistic system. At least in this way, we get things that we can use. And 90% of everything that we're getting is silicon dioxide, which still I have no idea how to use it. Somebody mentioned how I can extract the oxygen and silicon from it, but it's still something not very useful because you get tons of silicon and I don't need oxygen. This is why I'm calling it useless, otherwise I don't know. Maybe it's useful. However, since we are processing ores, we might as well try to use them. So, we need to make some changes to our blast furnaces. I use these super tanks Mark 1. Warp. Hello. I use the super tanks Mark 1 in order to provide fluid to our blast furnaces when we're cooking ingots, right? The thing is, these guys can only hold 4,000 buckets of a certain gas, and well, that's not actually a crazy amount. That's enough for 4,000 steel, which you can finish in like 1 hour. So I was thinking we go with a better super tank, and I was out of circuits. It's done, okay. Yes, we're going with super tank Mark 4. It can hold 32,000 buckets. That's great. Yeah. These tanks are way better. I can live with them. Another thing is that since we have consumed a lot of circuits, I'm running out of platinum. We don't really have a fully functional platinum line, but we do have a section of it, which makes us the platinum itself. It's just that it's not hooked up to anything, so we need some fluids. I need the ammonium chloride, I have oxygen, I need nitric acid, and hydrochloric acid apparently. Yeah. It's functioning again. Perfect. I have like 6,000 platinum dust, so we can fill it in. Don't you worry. To be very honest with you, this mod pack is not very complicated. It's just that there's a lot of things to do. And what makes it difficult is that you sometimes get lost in what you should do next. I know what I should do next. I also want to progress. Our next step in our progression is going to be this, the tier 3 rocket. This guy over here. Making it is not going to be very complicated, but we need thermal paddings and we need a brand new fuel. Saturn boosted diesel is not going to cut it anymore, and we're going to need something called dense hydrazine. So that is going to be our next task. However, there is a problem. From now on, we're going to require a ton of fluid crafting using chemical reactors. However, we don't have the capability for that. We don't have that many cells, our auto crafting is a bit garbage, and most of that is limited by this guy, the controller. So what we're going to do is that we're going to try and go with a far bigger controller. I have made a small expansion to our base now that we have removed the ore processing. The horsey got here. There's a hole. Oh yeah, there's a massive hole. But yeah, I have expanded our base and now we need to gather enough material in order to make a far bigger controller. While I'm gathering the resources I need in order to make more controller blocks, here's what we're going to do. We're also going to try and make as many MV circuits as we can. Because I want to start making smart cables and well, that requires an MV circuit. It's actually quite cheap. Nothing to worry about. For some reason I was under the impression that I don't really have pure fluix crystals left and I was trying to make them, and then I realized I had like 700 of it. So the controller is not really a big deal, and I have also made a decent supply of smart cables. We can have a bit more, but we are short on Certus quartz rods. And remember, I don't have a multi-block lathe, so that's it. I just have to remember to fill it in so that it constantly runs. So we are going to go with a 7x7x5 controller. Like so, cause in Meatball Craft I made the 7x7x7 and we only used one side, and I was even being wasteful. So I think for this mod pack, this is gonna be way more than enough. I hope. It's a really good thing that I did not dismantle the original controller and well, I was just playing with the cables, otherwise we would have been screwed. Cause this guy actually consumes a ton of power. It was around 2,500 EU, for some reason it dropped, and I think it's because some of the machines are not connected, but it's consuming a lot of power. So the generator that we had up there was no longer enough and I had to add a few more generators. They're high voltage, but there's 4 of them. These are Master Magic Energy Converters and well, they take shards. They make EU. So we have 2 amps of EV going into the controller and for the moment that should hold, I suppose. Now we just have to connect the machines and I think we will have our auto crafting back. Yeah, now that I have connected all the P2P tunnels, you can see the problem. We're consuming a bit more than an amp of EV. And now that we have a way bigger controller, we should be able to start some fluid crafting. Using chemical reactors, obviously. First fluids that we're going to use are the fluids that we're making up here, at our acid area. I'm carrying different colors of cables because, well, different colors of cables don't really connect to each other. But everybody connects to fluix. It's a decent way of skipping cable anchors everywhere. We need a free P2P tunnel. You're the one. This should not really be a big deal, but we can have storage buses at the bottom of the tanks. And we also right click with a screwdriver so that we can have input and output from the same side. So something like this should work. Obviously with a dense cable. So with the P2P tunnel linked, we should be able to read these tanks. I don't really have a fluid terminal, but I also don't think you really need to have one. For what I want to do at least. Because this is your storage, we just need to export it. Right? Although the only extra thing that I wanted to do over here was that you don't connect. Thank you. I'm making sulfuric acid over here and we're not producing sulfur here, obviously. So let's have an export bus, a chest like so, and we just export sulfur, right? Like so. I just need to do some conduit work. In addition to the 10 fluids that we have up here, we're going to need storage for 13 more fluids. I just made a massive list. We need 13 tanks. That should be correct. And obviously, as usual, some fluid storage buses. Here, I think I have to use some anchors, right? Actually, not really. We can just use 2 different colors of cable and then, you know, connect them like so. I actually have a massive shopping list. Let's go get the fluids. We need methane, and I'm assuming there should be a bit more methane somewhere, maybe up there. Yeah, more methane. I want to be able to craft every single important fluid that we need, so let's also get ethylene. Actually, I need acetone. That is ethylene. We need coal tar oil. That's for polybenzimidazole. Some phenol, and I was hoping to have more propane, but okay. That's for epoxy. Maybe I have some more in the base. Because that doesn't look right. Even though we have a tank for hydrochloric acid up here and we're automatically making it, we're going to have an extra tank because this one I cannot put it on void excess. And yeah, I also added salt water, so that's hydrochloric acid, we lock it, and void excess. So those were the fluids that we have, and later on we are going to make a system so that we don't have to go and collect them, but there are a few fluids that we don't have. One of them is fluorine. There are different sources for getting fluorine, and I think the best one for us at this very moment is biotite. I have 18,000 biotite. What? I can't really complain, I have been centrifuging stone dust. Yeah, it does give you a decent supply of oxygen, which we don't really need, but it also gives you fluorine and a bunch of garbage. I don't know why I have that much iron in here, but I'm not gonna complain. I also realized that I'm voiding a ton of carbon monoxide, which is a byproduct of making titanium, so I also added one more tank for it. However, this is going to get really confusing if we don't start making the things that we actually need, because then I'll be just collecting fluids for like 2 hours. Actually, that does not need to be a dense cable, I assume, because we're not going to use 4 million channels over here, so let's have a smart cable. In this way we would be able to keep track of the channels that we're using, which is 0. I think it's still booting. It's fine. Cabling and wiring takes a bit of time, but let us get started. So over here, what we're going to do is that we're going to automate circuit boards, we're going to automate epoxy, hopefully we are going to automate polybenzimidazole, polytetrafluoroethylene, and polyethylene, and maybe a few other fluids that I forgot. There's going to be a lot of them. And we are actually going to start with the fluids that I forgot to mention their name. Sodium persulfate and iron 3. So in order to make sodium persulfate, what we need is sodium hydroxide. I have been checking, it does seem that the best way of making sodium hydroxide is inside a chemical bath with water. So that's our water. We export sodium. Yeah, that is sodium hydroxide with a ton of hydrogen. It's actually quite fast. Look, it takes 1.3 seconds. We're using a fluid import bus. We're going to import the hydrogen back into our system, and it should go inside those tanks that we have up there at our acid area. I upgraded the tanks to the super tank Mark IV. Yeah, it's coming here. Cool. So the system works, you don't need a terminal. The sodium hydroxide that we have just made goes inside the drawer. It does have a storage bus, and next to it we're going to have a chemical reactor, high voltage, and I guess any conveyor will do. We shall mix it with sulfuric acid. I'm hoping I can drag and drop. Yes, you can. That gives us sodium bisulfate as well as water. So obviously the water we're just gonna void. We don't really care about the water. And yeah, I have some trash cans. Good. And the sodium bisulfate has to be electrolyzed. Do we have a high voltage? Yes. These are the old machines. I'm using them. And besides, this process is incredibly fast. It's high voltage, right? Yeah. Once this is electrolyzed, we get sodium persulfate, which we can use for ore processing as well as hydrogen. Yeah, single block machines are a bit of a jerk, so I'm using conduits, but the sodium bisulfate goes inside the fluid tank. And I have just remembered we have way more. Yeah. 1,500 buckets. We're going through storage buses like crazy, but yeah, the super tank is going to receive a storage bus. And we put it on extract only, lock the fluid. Alright guys, it has been a crazy amount of time later. It's actually 2 days later for me, and I have been very busy. And by busy, I just really mean busy. Therefore, let me try to explain to you what is it that I have been doing. So this section that you see in front of you is the section that we did together in order to get sodium persulfate. I added a bit more electrolyzers and I optimized the process. As a result, we have 8,000 buckets of sodium persulfate, and I am not going to go with iron 3. Sodium persulfate is going to be useful for ore processing, but it's actually not that amazing. That's the only amazing part for getting tantalum, but we don't have a shortage for it yet. And besides, I'm using the centrifuges with nitric acid in order to get more tantalite, so it's not really a big deal anymore. So as I mentioned, this is the part we did together, and that's the part that I have been working on my own. It's crazy. Also, it was a bit of a learning process, so as you go from right to left, the system gets more optimized. But basically, these 4 chemical reactors that you see in front of you are making us rubber. And that's it. There are a few assemblers in order to make us cables, and there's also an advanced solidifier which gives us the bars which we can convert to anything that we want. Ignore these tanks. These tanks are actually for the previous system, the ore processing. But over here we have a chemical reactor which is making us PVC. You know, same system, basic solidifier, and we get the bars. And over here it gets a bit confusing for me because I also don't really remember, but yeah, we are making sodium formate for making formic acid, and we are also making hydrofluoric acid in order to make go to hell, or polytetrafluoroethylene. Next to it are 2 more chemical reactors making us PTFE, or go to hell. Again, same system, we get the bars, and we also get the fluid. Then we have a massive array of chemical reactors doing so many things at the same time. The first one is actually making us formic acid. Formic acid is something that we need in order to operate a platinum line, so we have a passive production of it. The rest of the system just makes us epoxy. We have a chemical bath in order to make circuit boards, we also have a solidifier, we also keep the fluid. And after that we have our final chemical reactor with a distillery, which is making us phthalic acid. It's not the most efficient way of doing that, but we're basically making naphthalene and then the phthalic acid. Phthalic acid is useful for ore processing, it's used for dense hydrazine for our rocket, and most importantly, we need it in order to make polybenzimidazole. And if you're noticing some of the machines are off, it's either the buffer is full or we're out of some ingredients which I was trying to fix, or we're out of propane and phenol, as well as fluorine and etc. But those are easily fixable. Fixable? I guess that is a word. The reason that I'm calling this a learning process is that here you might notice that I'm sharing walls. I thought this is the most efficient way of doing stuff, which is actually true, but each one of the chemical reactors is dedicated to one process. It's 4 steps, so there are 4 chemical reactors. Once you move down the line, well, some of the chemical reactors are doing more than one job. And if you move further down the line, you might notice that I'm using quadruple input hatches. You can put multiple fluids inside and the machine will process it, and that is going to save on channels. So we are sharing walls, we're using quadruple input hatches, and we are also doing several processes inside one chemical reactor. As a result of everything that I have done, we are running low on a few stuff. The main problem was actually oxygen, because everything that you do requires a ton of oxygen, and well, the tank was empty. Our ore processing was processing the ores and I was voiding the gases, so using some ender tanks, we're no longer voiding them. We're getting hydrogen, oxygen and chlorine. And since some of the items are also going to provide us with fluorine, maybe we should have another ender tank? I just made ore processing this episode, and over the past few hundred hours, well, we gathered a ton of dust. All kinds of it. I have been processing those as well because we get oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, whatever. Yeah, I think even this one gives us fluorine. Am I right? Yes, I'm right. One electrolyzer is taking the chlorine, the other one is going to take the fluorine. So let's lock it. Obviously, ore processing is going to boost our production, otherwise we don't really need the ores at this very moment. But I'm happy with the changes because for the first time we're actually gaining oxygen and we're also getting some fluorine. Yeah, oxygen is dropping, but it will rise, don't you worry. Hydrogen is always almost full, and yeah, we're getting a bit of chlorine. We're consuming a lot, that's the point. However, another thing is that since I have been working on chemicals, I realized we're wasting a ton of time. I need a ton of ingots and well, the blast furnaces were not really working. So I'm cooking some aluminium, that was stainless steel, we have way more dust. Well, 400 more, not a ton. So we are going to let those cook. Where's the chicken? I'm gonna find you and I'm gonna kill you. Or maybe it's a warp thing because there's no chickens. I guess there are no chickens. Anyways, before we get to polybenzimidazole, there are a few automations that I want to do. Those are also regarding the ingots, and I think we're going to do that over here. Another egg. Come on. So normally the alloys and ingots that we want are basically a mixer recipe, like stainless steel, and then we have to cook it. At this very moment we do have a few exceptions which are not very straightforward. For example, tungsten. Basically we either get tungstate dust, which we have to convert it into sodium tungstate, then convert it into scheelite, or we actually get the scheelite and then we have to convert it into tungsten. And of course the other one is titanium, which comes from rutile, so let us try to fix a few things. We're going to start with tungsten, and yes, I had to tear out a few bits and bobs around the base. So over here we used to have 2 autoclaves, we still have them, but they're going to be automated. We're going to export tungstate dust into the autoclave, we mix it with sodium and water, and we get sodium tungstate and lithium dust. So the lithium dust can be exported back into our system, obviously. As for the sodium tungstate, we're going to use a fluid storage bus, which I guess should be on extract only, just in case. Then I have made myself a very complicated chemical reactor, and let's hope it works. If it works, it's going to do everything in one single machine. Well, most of the parts. So we get hydrochloric acid and we get the sodium tungstate, we get calcium chloride, we do have some scheelite in our system which are being exported as well, and I think that's it. Oh, power. Yes. I have the gas turbines on me. So it's processing the sodium tungstate, we're getting scheelite and salt. Salt should go inside an electrolyzer, we get some sodium and chlorine. And I did not think of this, but we have to import them as well. It's not really a big deal, for the moment we have like 20 channels over here. But yeah, they're being imported. So once we get rid of the sodium tungstate, it should start processing scheelite. Yep. It's now processing the scheelite, and we are getting tungstic acid dust. Perfect. I also added a blast furnace, which is taking the tungstic acid dust and it's giving us tungsten trioxide. All of them go inside the same input bus, and eventually we should get tungsten dust. However, as long as we're processing scheelite, there is going to be a bit of a problem: calcium chloride. Last time I counted, I have 15,000 scheelite, and well, that's going to give us a ton of calcium chloride. If you're going with sodium tungstate, calcium chloride goes on a loop, so you will never gain some, you will never lose some. You just need to have like a stack inside your input bus and then it will go on a loop. However, our main source of tungsten at this very moment is scheelite, so we have to electrolyze that calcium chloride later on manually. And then whatever we have inside this input bus should be more than enough forever once we transition to tungstate dust. But that should take care of tungsten. Let us move on to titanium. So at this very moment we almost have 2000 titanium. However, it's in the fluid form, but we need to automate that one as well. We just need to have one more chemical reactor. And yes, this was a Minesweeper game I played, I failed, so it broke. So I can remove the dungeon blocks. Not a big deal. It's just that it's a bit of a pain. Can you like hammer it? Okay, yeah. One by one it was so painful. Alright guys, currently the base is just a mess. Let me get some mufflers, because the vacuum freezer is just loud. We turn you off. Yes, as I was saying, the base is just a mess, but we are going to try and fix it as soon as possible. But we do have a functioning system. Our blast furnace is actually giving us tungsten dust, which is amazing. We have 15,000 scheelite, so it's gonna take a while. Then I have another system which is giving me titanium tetrachloride as well as carbon monoxide inside one chemical reactor, and everything goes inside the super tank. And the main reason that I'm using a super tank is that I had like 2000 titanium tetrachloride, the bucket, not the ingot. So I needed some sort of a buffer. Titanium that we're making goes inside a vacuum freezer. This one is off right now because magnesium chloride dust is full. Yeah, so once the tank gets full, I'm assuming we will get our magnesium back one day. Everything is going to take ages, but it's fine, it's automatic, I don't really need to do a single thing. So titanium is also off the list, we have 2 more stuff. The other one is actually ilmenite. So currently our ore processing is sending all the ilmenite dust, the crushed version, into our applied energistic system. We need to somehow infuse it with sulfuric acid and get rutile. I want that part to be automated as well. I do have a P2P tunnel down here, this should be easy. After fixing ilmenite, it was time for indium. Indium is a metal that we need in order to make IV superconductors for the IV energy hatch. For extracting indium, I'm using 2 large chemical reactors. One of them is for the indium concentrate and the other one is for the indium dust itself. And since indium is a byproduct of sphalerite, I went mining for sphalerite, chalcopyrite, 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 salt, mica, and more chalcopyrite. The sphalerite that we have obtained should give us a decent supply of indium, which meant we could finally make the IV energy hatch, which in turn means that I can start working on polybenzimidazole, and yes, it's a huge and complicated process and it has a quest line for it. Polybenzimidazole enables us to make thermal paddings, so that we would be able to visit new planets using a tier 3 rocket. Although now that we have thermal paddings, I guess it's also a good time to start making the actual rocket. For the next 2 tiers of rocket, what we need is a brand new fuel called dense hydrogen, which is made inside a chemical plant. Chemical plant has different tiers. Titanium tier is going to be good enough for us, but we're going to go with tungsten steel. We will need that later on. Of course, by having fuel, rocket, and a quantum chestplate, we have no choice. We have to go exploring, and our first destination will be Ceres. I'm actually going there mainly for the arc lamp, but on Ceres we're also looking for platinum, palladium, and apparently there's pure chrome. That's nice. After gathering a decent supply of samples, I decided to visit a planet called Ross 128b. I'm just visiting there for extreme curiosity because it is a peaceful, habitable planet which used to be home to younger ancient civilizations. And apparently you can also find the 0-point module over there. It's useless. Ladies and gentlemen, I am back at the base, and yes, we have arc lamps, finally. You don't notice the difference until I remove the goggles of revealing. It does light up a huge area. Look. Although I would like to admit, yes, the main goal of making that rocket is not to get the arc lamp. The main goal is to go to the asteroids and get something called Naquadah. Hello, hungry node. Which obviously we are going to do that very soon, so don't you worry. I just came here to gather some ores from the drills. They have been running for a very long time. And before I forget, in the comment section of the previous episode, somebody mentioned that I did not show the interior of our Thaumcraft base. Well, it's incomplete. We still have grass, but that's the interior. You know, we have our storage, we have our smelteries, and I have my bed, which is not purple. We have some extra rooms for probably some nodes, some energized nodes, and this will be our staircase to the second floor. But that's it, there's nothing to it. Also, don't you worry, I have my mushrooms in the back on fertile soil. Again, before I forget, somebody also mentioned that he wants to see the room behind something here. We don't have that many rooms, we just have our storage here. And there's also a room for our smeltery. Back here, there wasn't actually a room, there was just like 5 or 6 compressed chests for my inventory panel. And this tunnel is new, it's for the cables, which, you know, comes to our storage. My ore processing seems to be working fine. I like that. It's actually quite fast once it warms up. Yeah, really fast. I like you. Anyways, I was looking through the JEI, and it seems in order to process Naquadah, one of the things that we need is seed oil. I was processing a teeny tiny bit of seed oil over here in order to get glycerol, which we have like 100 buckets, but I removed all the peanuts. I thought we don't need glycerol anymore. So even though glycerol is not important, and I could be wrong about the Naquadah, I'm not really sure, I have never made it, we still need to have the seed oil if we want to get into bees, which is not something optional actually. So I have brought the 2 farms over here. We have a creeper egg, we do have a fluid extractor, and we also have a compressor for getting plant balls because I need it in order to make hempcrete. I don't need it that much, this is why it doesn't really have a buffer, and talking about buffers, we need a super tank. You have light fuel. I don't need that. And yeah, very soon we're going to repurpose our original base and we're going to have a bit of auto crafting in there. If possible, next episode I want to get into fluid crafting. It's getting painful. There is a slight time gap. I had to prepare a few things at our Thaumcraft base for next episode, but yeah, this is a decent system. There are far better ways of getting seed oil through canola, but we don't have any infrastructure for it yet, at least not until LUV. There is a far better farming station which is going to be available to us at LUV, and I'm going to use that in order to process IC2 crops. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, I think it's also a good time to wrap up the episode. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. Till the next one, bye bye.